gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy. Remarkable?
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, talking about B2B marketing lessons from Dune.
My planet Arrakis is so beautiful when the sun is low. Rolling over the sands, you can see spice in the air. The outsiders ravage our lands in front of our eyes. Their cruelty to my people is all I've known. What's to become of our world?
With the help of our special guest, VP of Corporate Marketing at Cribl, Ryan Mattison. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Ian, for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Indeed. We have some, we have a lot to get to. We're going to talk about marketing Cribl and, of course, Dune. So why the heck did you pick Dune to talk about today?
Well, first, I have always been like a sci-fi fantasy nerd at heart. I was, sort of born and bred on it. My dad was a big fantasy nerd. One of my earliest memories growing up was like him reading the first Lord of the Rings to us. I picked up the second two myself. I figured the out loud was too slow for my tastes. But as I got older, we shifted into more of the science fiction, a little bit more philosophical. And he was like, Dune is one of the classics. It kind of kicked off really the whole genre of sci-fi in a modern way. And so, the books I love, I think are great. I have to, say the David Lynch movie in the 80s is maybe not my favorite film, but the movies that came out, in the last, 3-4 years, I think are some of the best just in cinema history. And I think are, have a lot of lessons for marketers too, of like, how did they stand out? How did they, really break out of the slump that Hollywood was in and build such an iconic brand that people are excited to go and see in the theaters? People can't wait for the new show to come out on HBO. So I figured it was a good opportunity for me to, nerd out and hopefully provide a little bit of insight into how I think Dune was so successful and what we as marketers can take away from it.
You mentioned Lord of the Rings being one of the places that you started. Do you know how tall a hobbit is?
I think they're about 3 feet tall. I think they're supposed to be half the size of a full-grown man. And I always like to say I'm 6 feet on a good day. And so, I'm going to go with 3 feet.
But the weight, this is reference to a 20-minute conversation we had previous to this recording about the size of hobbits, as I'm one to do.
That's an episode in and of itself. We'll get to that some other time.
It really is. So you are VP of Corporate Marketing at Cribl. Previous to that, at ThoughtSpot, one of our favorite all-time companies, someone who actually, fun fact, took a lot of inspiration for Caspian Studios' website many years ago. And as you know, I was the first host for the first episode of the ThoughtSpot podcast back in the day.
That's right. Back in the day, the Data Chief. Shout out to Cindy Howson. It's a great podcast. If you are looking for great content about how to make the most of data, check it out.
So you've worked on a bunch of stuff, but tell us about Cribl and what you're doing there.
Yeah. So I'm about 3 months in at Cribl and fantastic ride so far. Really enjoying, the people and the technology really. And so I think that's where, all good B2B stories start. Cribl's the data engine for IT and security. Really our promise is simple, right? We make telemetry data management simple, right? We give security IT team, observability teams choice, control, flexibility when it comes to making their telemetry data really the backbone of how they power their operations. The engine has 4 components. We got 4 kind of main product lines that in collection make up that portfolio. We've got Stream, which is sort of our flagship. That's where Cribl's product journey started. And that's to help you route data from different sources to different destinations. We have Lake, So if you want to store your telemetry data, your logs, your traces, your metrics, we've got a place to do it in a really cost-effective way where you can then search our other product and actually search in that lake to understand, hey, I need to, find where, this particular piece of software was talking to this one, or what user logged in here and where. And then Edge, which is one of our newest offerings. And Edge allows you to actually collect that data, out at where the software or where that telemetry data is being generated. And so, my job here at Cribl is corporate marketing. I like to think of as the role that ties together the brand story and the product story, and to create that kind of cohesive narrative that is, who is the company and how does that, unfold as a narrative, right? How does it have chapters? How does it have a beginning, a middle, maybe not an end, but, feel like it's flowing in an ever-growing, ever-encompassing, ever-expansive way, while again, sort of connecting to the hearts, minds of the constituencies that matter. Those are customers, prospects, investors, media, analysts, employees, prospective employees, basically anybody, who is going to care about Cribl. How do we meet them where they are and tell them a story that helps them, understand what we do and how we provide value to them? So in practice, that has sort of 4 real components that I like to lovingly refer to them as the 4 C's. I'm a big fan of alliteration. So that's corporate events, that's creative, that's communications, and that's campaigns. So I have a fantastic team here that I am very fortunate enough to lead, that, we go out and we tell that story across all those different channels.
We talk a lot on the show about this sort of 3-headed hydra that is marketing of, demand, brand, and product. And this brand being corporate marketing, right?
Yeah.
So used to be called corporate marketing, still sometimes called corporate marketing. Sometimes it's called brand content and comms. Sometimes it's called community. Sometimes it's called branding community. Sometimes it's called, whatever. But those are the people. Those are our people, the people that we bring on the show predominantly.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, before we get into Dune here, I am curious, like, coming into this role as, figuring out what you're responsible for, did you have a preference for that? Like, did you have a preference for what corporate marketing owned?
Yeah, I think I have a pretty strong point of view. It probably comes from my love of stories in general, that the story is what's going to win, right? You can have great technology, you can have great distribution in terms of being able to get, your content in front of people. But if the narrative itself doesn't work and doesn't start from an outside-in point of view, right? It starts with the user, it starts with the buyer, it starts with the investor, it starts with the employee, you are not going to be able to be as successful as you can be. And so, my own career in marketing have always really gravitated toward the areas of marketing, whether that was, PR, whether that was in social, whether that was in advertising, whether that was in events, where it's the story is the center. And I think as, when I was coming into Cribl, that's what really attracted me to the role in the first place, was that was the ethos of the kind of person they were looking to bring on. Is how do we connect the dots? Because we have great product marketing, we have great demand gen, right? We've run and throw incredible events. But what's the way that we connect all of those together? So to use a cliche, 1 and 1 truly is 3. And that's the story, right? There's a reason that there's the most successful sort of books of all time are novels and narrative, not collections of essays about different topics. That's a really interesting, sometimes, way of examining a variety of areas. But humans are drawn to stories that move us over time, that have that beginning, that have that middle. And I think that's really what I saw at the role here at corporate marketing. And that in general is the kind of work that I love to do.
Meredith, what the heck is Dune?
So in this episode, we're talking about Dune, the 2021 movie, but originally it was a book.
That is Meredith O'Neill, our amazing producer extraordinaire.
So Frank Herbert wrote the book in 1965, and the movie came about because the director, Denis Villeneuve, who's French-Canadian, read the book when he was 13 years old. And he was like, immediately, I'm obsessed. There was just something imaginative about it, something that drew him in emotionally.
I mean, there's something about the journey of the main character, Paul Atreides, his feeling of isolation, the way he was struggling with the burden of his heritage, family heritage, genetic heritage, political heritage, climatic heritage, all this weight on his shoulder, and then finally being able to find freedom through the contact with another culture.
He sort of described himself as this anxious kid who grew up in rural Quebec, and he found escape through reading.
That feeling of that deep melancholia, that feeling of isolation, and that attraction to massive white spaces and foreign cultures. There was something about that struck me at the time.
And at the same time, he dreamed of becoming a movie director. And so when he would have trouble sleeping, he's like storyboarding in his head, and he'd think about his own adaptation of Dune. And so it was just like this dream that he had.
I've been having dreams about Arrakis and the Fremen.
He obviously did become a director. He started in French films and then transitioned to English language. And he said, I remember a journalist asking me what would be my dream project. If I had all the money in the world, what I would love to do. And I said spontaneously, Dune. It was one of my oldest dreams. Not that it hadn't been adapted into a movie, I should say. One version, this was so wild, one version in the 1970s was supposed to star Mick Jagger, Salvador Dali, Orson Welles, like wild casting, but it failed to get funding because the director, who was like Chilean French, I think, I forget his name, but he wanted the movie to be 12 hours long. And they were like, no, like this isn't going to work because Dune is so, and we'll get into this too, but the book is so dense. There's a lot going on. And he was like, how do I make this shorter? But another that you had mentioned earlier, Ryan, was a movie directed by David Lynch. And actually, he had a terrible time in the process and won't even talk about it now. So that's a whole other story, I think. So, but even so, Villeneuve said he wouldn't think at all about what had been done before. He had his own vision. And he said, I tried to focus on the emotions I had when I read the book, how images could create these feelings and how it would influence the world's design.
The idea was then to try to get back in contact with this part of me that read the book.
But of course, there are a lot of challenges that he faced. One, how I mentioned, the book is incredibly dense. So he was like, we need to split this into 2 movies. And he said the movie could have easily collapsed under a tremendous amount of exposition. So a lot going on that he wanted to be able to explore. And 2, he was really challenged by the world building aspect of the story. We haven't really talked about what it is or what it looks like, but it's basically like set on different planets. It's very like desert landscape with like sort of brutalist architecture and really interesting costuming. And of course it's sci-fi, right? So, they play a lot with that. So Villeneuve said, it was a small unit process to try and define the visual language of the film, to make sure that the humans would feel crushed by the size of nature and the architecture, and to bring a strong feeling of isolation and melancholy into the world. So instead of turning to the easiest place for inspiration, which is the internet, right? Villeneuve said the internet is the mind killer. And he said he wanted his team to stay away from all influence and just try to meditate and dream, which I thought was super interesting. And so instead of going to the internet, they turned to the library and finding these vintage books. And so I was thinking like, why would they do that? But I was thinking like the internet wasn't around in 1965. And so I think they're sort of looking at the sort of retro futuristic stuff that they maybe got inspiration from for the book. So also similarly, instead of choosing a costume designer who had sci-fi experience, Villeneuve chose this woman, Jacqueline West. I don't know if it's Jacqueline West. For her, she was an award-winning costume designer who specifically worked on period films. And so she would do like lots and lots of research, find historic inspiration for costuming. And actually, she declined doing the movie a few times until she actually talked to Villeneuve and heard what his vision was. And then she was super inspired by it and agreed. But speaking of world building and making the movie this sort of tactile experience, there are a lot of what the editor of the movie, Joe Walker, calls brainstemmy images. And he's like, these are sensory images that appeal to the old parts of the brain. So I noticed there are like a lot of shots of like hands touching things in the movie. So there's like sand sifting through fingers. In one shot, the person is letting a bug crawl into their fingers or like touching cloth. There's a lot of like shots of hands. And that was like a real decision that they made about how they wanted the audience to experience the film, to really like have a sensory connection and an emotional connection to what's happening on screen. So if I were to take some sort of lessons from all of this, it's like, look back to your childhood dreams, right? Like what was inspiring to you? What were you super passionate about? And I think you can still make them happen, sort of instill it in your content. I would say focus on the feel of your content, create sensory experiences if you can, and then look outside the internet or social media for inspiration, whether that means like looking at archival stuff or just sort of like sitting with your own thoughts and brainstorming that way. But through all of that, Ryan, I know you mentioned in a previous call, we talked about sort of the press tour for Dune and how that was sort of remarkable for you. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I love about Dune outside of just like the story and the film itself is the way that they marketed the movie. And it has like all of the attributes of a really strong, like brand driven campaign, right? To your point, like they were super intentional about like, it's this like hyper tactile like shots of the movie. If you look at even like the posters that they created, they had like this really interesting, like very close up view of the stars where they're like, hey, you've seen, you know, Timothée Chalamet, you've seen, you know, Zendaya before, you've seen all of these people, but let's show them in a really innovative format, right? For how typically you don't necessarily, like you think of like there's that joke of like, you know, the Star Wars movie poster could be the Marvel movie poster. Like they all kind of had the same feel of like 7 people fanned out in a seashell like formation. They took a totally different tact with that felt so distinct and felt very visceral. And I think that, to your point, is like a lot of like appealing to the, you know, the more like primal parts of our brain and our humanity, which is a very like strong part of the film. And that was not just though in like the posters, right? They did it even in like and it's interesting you mentioned like the costuming, because I think even on the press tour, like the outfits that everybody wore were so distinct. Like I always say, like great branding has like 3 elements, right? It needs to be ownable, it needs to be unmissable, and it needs to be consistent. And the fact that you're like, I see some, you know, Florence Pugh walking down the red carpet and you're like, that is a Dune inspired, like, you know, gown that she's wearing. That isn't just a like really cool piece of fashion, which I think a lot of times movies like miss the mark there, where they will just be like, hey, you know, we want you to be on the best dress list. That's like great. That's going to be really, you know, but this is like, no. This is an opportunity to continue to drive that connection with the audience, to get them excited, to be like, this is the world, the universe, because it's more than one world, the universe of Dune. And it's so expansive and it's so connective. And that has like the hallmark of really, really good branding. Like marketers should be thinking the same, right? Like there is no time when somebody is engaging with any facet of your brand or your business in which you shouldn't be representing that perception that you want to drive, right? Like you're not telling, every one of those is an opportunity to tell your story in a potentially different channel, different way. But from the outsider, right? Like if you're the person who's watching the press tour, who's seeing the movie poster, who's like seeing the, you know, partnership that they did with like Fortnite and being like, oh, there's giving like skins and like, you know, domains that kind of feel like Arrakis. Like that is all that motivates you to go and say, hey, I want to like watch that movie. It feels so much bigger, so much more real. And that's true for B2B brands, right? Like whether you're at an event, whether you're in a product sandbox, whether you're like seeing somebody at the airport wearing a t-shirt that's, you know, from a company, those are all opportunities to do that same thing, to tell that connective story and leave that meaningful impression that you're intentional about.
So I follow Legendary on Instagram. And so I feel like I saw every single post about the press tour. So, and like, I remember saying to someone, I was like, they're like, oh, have you seen Dune yet? Or we're talking about Dune. And I was like, well, they're like marketing the living heck out of this. Like they're doing all sorts of stuff. And the person was like, I don't know what you're talking about on. I think I just follow them on Instagram. So I think I've probably seen it more. But I don't know how many cities, do you know how many cities they went to globally? I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but it was a lot. They did a really big international rollout and it crushed internationally. I think it did like 700 million international box office for Dune 2. And I think like 500 to 400 something million was international. So they really focused on, you know, doing that stuff, which is a huge ask, right? For the actors and everybody involved and, you know, dressing up and doing all that stuff. Especially like when you have massive stars, you know, and Zendaya and Chalamet. But like, if you're going to do it, you got to do it big, right? Yeah. And like, that's what they understood is like everything about this felt grandiose. And they really wanted people to see it. You know what I mean? Like, and that seems silly to say, like, they really wanted people to see it. But like, they really did. They wanted people to see it on IMAX. They wanted people to go with their friends. They wanted people to go to the movie theaters.
I think that's also something that's really distinct about the marketing that they did, was they were not trying to say, even though they did a simultaneous release, because it was the first one came out and like pretty much still the height of the pandemic. And a lot of movies who would try to do a theatrical release and a streaming service release kind of were, I think, like waffling between the two of like, maybe someone will see it, maybe the streamer will pay us enough. But like Dune was super intentional about like, first of all, this is a theater experience, right? Like you need the big, like that feeling of when they use the voice, which is like a construct where, they kind of can like almost like mind control, super, power of suggestion. You feel that in your body in the theater in a way that you cannot feel unless you have some crazy at-home sound system, right? Like that was purposeful, that was intentional. And they used that even in like the ads, right? Like they wanted people, and they were, again, that idea of intentionality of like, we want you to come to the theater. And I thought you mentioned something else really interesting, right? About how successful it was at the box office. It was also really successful at the box office because of the premium tickets, right? Which is like IMAX. Like people who are like, I don't want to just see this in the theaters. Even that was already like, okay, you're asking me during the pandemic to come into the theater and watch something, when Hollywood had been really unsuccessful in sort of driving that behavior. They were like, come in and pay $20, $25 for a ticket to see this. But I think it was, again, because of that idea of like, we're connecting to you viscerally. We're telling you the story in all of the marketing that we're doing, that like, this will be so much better. So it's such a big world. Why would you not see it on the biggest screen possible? And it worked, right? Like the proof is in the dollars. They were able to drive, because I was reading somewhere, like the ticket sales were really impressive itself, but in particular, the over-index on those premium tickets, which is something that no one really, besides like some of the superhero Marvel movies, have ever seen that level of sort of segmentation between typical theater, regular theater, and IMAX.
Yep. And there was a reason to do it, right? Like there really was a reason to do it.
Yeah, it wasn't just they're saying, hey, it's a better, we're going to sell more or we make more money if you come in. They were like, this movie will be experienced better. So that's also, I think, a good lesson for marketers, right? Which is like, deliver an authentic experience and people will pay for it. You shouldn't just say our product is cheaper than someone else, or it's like, this product is better in this way, and this is how you're going to get the most out of it. And this is how you're going to, like, your day will be better. Watching this film, will have a more lasting impression on you. It's again, that idea of like being intentional and connecting it with a really like authentic value prop that they was obviously for Dune was super real and realized, and saying that large screen format with the premium sound is going to really, really differentiate, your experience with the movie.
What other marketing takeaways do we have for Dune? Yeah.
Well, I kind of hit on one, but I think Dune also did probably one of the best jobs in recent years of doing like partnership driven marketing, like finding ways to target. And I think partner marketing is an avenue to say like, hey, there's an audience that we need to reach that we don't necessarily have, the best existing penetration into. Like movies are, if you look at general, like theater going is skewing older and older and older. Younger audiences are like, I'll just watch something at home on streaming. But something like Fortnite, right, which is like, has a much younger skewed audience. By doing such a deep partnership with them, and I can't remember where about it was like one of their most expensive partnerships that they like ended up like running, because they were like, we need to target a younger demographic, because if we can get kids to say, or young folks, 15, 16-year-olds to say to their parents, I want to go see Dune. And their parents are like, I was already kind of thinking about going to see Dune, but my kids want to go. Now it's a family thing for us to go do. That becomes like, first of all, you're not selling one ticket or two tickets. You're selling 4, 5, 6 tickets at one time.
Yep.
And so I think that's something really valuable for marketers, especially in the B2B space. Like if you are selling technology, almost no technology is a go it alone story for how your user is using it. The value is almost never, I'm using one tool to do one job. It's this tool is a part of a stack that I'm doing, whether it's, a data stack or it's a marketing stack or it's an e-commerce stack. But like thinking about how do you find the right partners that let you, where again, I'll use that same cliche I said earlier, we're like 1 and 1 is 3, where you're not just saying, hey, we have enough overlap. 40% of our audience is the same, but it's like maybe 15% of our audience is the same, but there's mutual value here, right? Because for Fortnite, it was like, hey, yeah, we're getting some money for them, but also like we're getting parents who are the ones who are going to like swipe a credit card to be like, yeah, we went and saw Dune and that was really fun. Okay, I'll pay for you to get that skin, or I'll pay, And so there was this way for there to be a real synergy and value for both sides of the partner, but really in pursuit of value for the user, which was the person who wanted to go out and see that movie, play that game. And so I think that's something that technology brands should really take away from Dune. It's like, how do you find the right partner that's not just the easy partner, but the partner where you're able to find or open up new channels, new demographics, new audiences, and again, in a way that feels like there's intentional value being delivered.
You made a great point there with the Fortnite piece, because does the 11-year-old want to go see Dune? Maybe, maybe not, or maybe, whatever, but they have to have a conversation with their parents about buying the skin. And then all of a sudden it opens the conversation to be like, well, if we're going to buy you the skin, we may as well go see the movie, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a 13, 12, 11-year-old probably has not heard of Dune, right? That's maybe not a book that's in that age group or demographic is like reading, even if you're like, I love sci-fi. Like, I think I was 16 when I read it. I wasn't 10. But like, my parents definitely had read it. If I was 10, I said, hey, there's this like Dune thing I want. They would have been like, oh, you want to see that? Well, this movie, maybe we can go see as a family then. Or, maybe when you're 11, you're like old enough to go and see a PG-13 movie. But there is that idea too of like, how do you bridge sort of a demographic gap by leveraging partnership, which I thought they did a really, really excellent job of.
You saw the one they made in the 70s, I'd.
I saw the one they made in the 80s, the one with the David Lynch one.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the Dave Lynch one, right?
I feel like I saw that it was almost like it felt like camp. It was like so ridiculous. And that's also something I thought, this like the marketing and like the press tour in particular did a really nice job of, was like recasting the narrative around Dune. Because I think if you talk to someone, like I talked to my parents and they were like, my mom would actually like at first was like, I will not watch the Dune movie, like the new one. She's like, I've already seen the old ones. It was so bad. It was stupid. I didn't like it. And I think like through like even being like, oh, look how cool this is. Let's look at the trailer together. Like it just felt so purposefully different from just that like almost silly sci-fi of the 80s, where this felt like slick, cool, brutalist, like really, really, and like, the director, Denis Villeneuve, like when he was like the way he even described his vision for it felt so diametrically opposed to, I think, the way that the film from the 80s sort of is perceived then and perceived today. And I think that's a really tough challenge to do, right? To say, hey, this is for a B2B marketer. Let's say this is like the category of the product. You're selling CRM software, you're selling, I don't know, data analytics, or you're selling, like this is what it does. And everyone's like, I've heard that promise before. I've seen that before. It didn't actually like live up to the hype, or I didn't love how it actually was implemented or the experience my team got. There's a lot of lessons to learn about like how that full court press, that like really integrated sort of like campaign I feel like they ran, was able to dramatically shift the narrative for these movies.
I think that it's a really important point, because I'd seen the old Dune movie and I was like, why would I go see something that I've already seen? Like, I know the plot, I know what happens, I know the twist, I know all that stuff. And like, I'm into this stuff, so I was going to go. But the idea is like, to speak to the point about your mom, right? Like, that's the exact sentiment. It was like, oh, is that the one where people, drink pee out of their own suits? Like, that's like, I don't need to see that again. Like literally. And so I think it's like a little bit of revisionist history. You'd be like, yeah, well, the first movie made, 400 something million in the box office and XYZ, and it's during COVID. I actually watched it at home. I think my wife was pregnant at the time, but I remember watching it at home, which is funny because I didn't go to the big theater and didn't do all that stuff. It's sort of like, oh, I'll give it a shot. And I think that it's a really important point that like there is an alternate reality where this just like doesn't work at all. Where it's like they remade something that crashed. Obviously, there's a huge percentage of people that are gonna see this anyways because they love the books and they love Dune and they want to go to this place. And then there's a huge percentage of people that have no relationship with this because they definitely didn't see the movie in the 80s, right? And those people really like Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, on and on and on, all these other actors that are amazing, Momoa and all of them, this amazing cast. But like they pick two mega stars. I mean, mega stars. Like arguably, I mean, Zendaya might be the, other than, like Taylor Swift and Beyonce, stuff like that, but she's probably the biggest like mega star in that age group. And that gets people to go to the theaters, right? It's why people, actors are called bankable. Like Zendaya is a bankable It's Zendaya or Zendaya. Anyways, shout out Oakland, California, where she's from, where she and I are from. Sorry. But I think that that's like a really key part of this is this was the first interaction with Dune for, I would bet, a massive percentage of the audience that saw this. And this is their only interaction. They never read the books. They didn't watch the first movie. And I think that like, that's like one of those, I love this marketing technique of let's try it again for the first time, right? For the people like your mom, it's like, hey, try it again for the first time. Like, yeah, I know you saw the old, there's nothing like that. Just try it again. It'll feel like the first time you're doing it. Whereas for the other people, it's like, hey, try this thing for the first time. And like, those are very different messages. And I feel like they nailed both. And I feel like they nailed one side of the messaging with the like, it's this visionary director, it's this massive budget, it's all these stars. You see the rollout of, I mean, literal years of the visuals and the sweeping, sand and all that stuff and sandworms, all like you just, you get it. And they did that for a long time. And that was pandering to all the people who were like, the first one stunk, or not the first one, but the original movie. And it, like that stuff is all important, right? It's like they were hitting each demographic with different messaging, even though it's like kind of the same messaging, but it shows that they put the craft in this time around.
Yeah, there's the value of, again, like segmentation and sort of personalizing it based on that. The other thing I think that's interesting is you think about like the power of like, what do they call it? Like the megawattage stars. And there's been a lot of discourse in Hollywood, I think, recently around like, is that still true? Like, is there such a thing as a bankable star? And I think that's evolving in the current world because you can have a star, like if I think of the movie Challengers, similar, caliber of cast, big budget, while critically really well received, did not necessarily perform, from a box office perspective in the way that they thought it was going to. And I think that there's the actual like experience for the user, not the critic, right? Because the critic is not the point of like building a movie. The point of, or at least from a commercial standpoint, it's for the viewer. It's for someone to go out and be like, hey, I have not seen a movie like this before, or this was so good, or this like, made me scream in the theater, or made me cry in the theater, or I just like, oh my gosh, my mind was blown. People, and including me, like walked away from Challengers and was like, okay, like interesting that there was sort of like a love triangle and kind of a tennis movie. But there was nothing that I was like, I have to go and tell someone about this. I have to talk about this with someone else. And I think there's that idea too of like the role of the star is like shifting from like full funnel marketing, right? Where that's like, it's both going to attract your audience, it's going to get them into the theater, and then, it's going to get the critics to care, is moving now into like, just if you think of like a traditional marketing funnel, awareness. Like putting a big star like that in a movie is going to get people to be like, I'm paying attention to it. But we live in such a tight world of like feedback loops, right? It's not like you can rely just on a big star to say we're going to at least hit the expectations for the opening weekend. People are going to know Saturday morning from a friend, from Rotten Tomatoes, right? From the internet, like if that movie's good or not. Whereas 20 years ago, when, Tom Cruise put him in a movie, it's going to at least perform for the first 2 weeks. People are like, I'm going to see it because Tom Cruise is in it. And I don't have enough of a feedback loop to be able to go out and say, oh, it's not, or not a short enough of a feedback loop to be like, is this actually good? So I think that's also a good lesson for marketers just thinking about it. It's like the role of a great advertising campaign, maybe, 10, 15 years ago could really like hold its own but now it has to be like, it has to tie into, again, that idea of like, what's the authentic value that you deliver with your product? Is that actually real? Because people are going to be able to like share that information in very, very, very short cycles with each other.
Yeah. I think you compare this to the other popular things that are out versus the non-popular ones. The Joker's getting absolute Joker 2 or whatever it's called. It's getting absolutely flamed and did horrible and is going to lose a ton of money.
I mean, that's pretty wild too. That movie is a musical and they didn't even market in almost any of their materials that it's a musical. That's like the antithesis of authentic marketing, right? Yep. You have two giant stars, like, and built on, it's a sequel to $1 billion global box office film. I think Joker, the first one, was like $1 billion box office. And this one is absolutely tanking. And I think there's two things about it, right? Like it's tanking because it feels like, I was reading a review about it where the reviewer was like, they're like tentative about it being a surrealist, like musical exploration of his descent into like being truly like, mad. And then in the marketing, they didn't explain that. It's the same with like the Mean Girls musical when that came out. The fact that people like sat down in the theater and like, wait, this is a musical. This isn't just like a remake of the movie from the early 2000s. And I think that kind of like bait and switch is really, really sort of anathema to consumers today, whether that's a B2B buyer, whether that's somebody who's going to sit in a movie theater, whether that's somebody who's like, hey, I'm trying to, drink a soda, like anything in that vein, right? Like we want to know that what you market to me is what I'm getting. And if not, it's not going to connect.
And you nailed it that it's like bad word travels real fast these days, right? Like real fast. Conversely, with Dune Part 2 did way better than the first one. And the first one did really well because of all the reasons that we said, because they had a massive rollout, because they had an audience, because they had a story that had a logical second part that we knew was coming and we knew we wanted. And so if they nail the first part, you're like, I definitely meant to see the second one, right? I mean, how many people saw the first one and were like, nah, I'm out for 2? You know what I mean? Like, it's like nobody, right?
I mean, and I think that to your point too, like the word of mouth, like, because there's so many people who are like, I loved the first one so much. There were people who were like, oh, the second one's coming out. Like I had friends who I went and saw the second one in theaters with who were like, oh, I'm going to watch the first one for the first time the day before because I want to be part of this like phenomenon where so many people that I'm hearing about, like, I kind of feel like if you have like 3 friends in a circle of 10 and 3 of them are saying like, oh my God, we can't wait to go see this movie. It was so incredible. You'll get 3 more of that group of friends to be like, I probably want to go and at least be a part of it just so I'm not, FOMO'd on this. And that's how that builds. And I think that's a big part other, than the fact that the pandemic wasn't happening and they could really do a big theatrical release. But like it was building on a foundation of like, oh my gosh, people are not just, that was a good movie, but people are like, I was salivating for the second one, and I think that's contagious.
One of my marketing takeaways for Dune is, how you double your ticket sales is get people to invite their friends. You said it over and over today, but it's so true. Like, my brother was like, dude, we got to go see Cocaine Bear in the theaters. I'm like, sure. You want to go? I'm in. We're not going and sitting there by yourself. Like, but the idea is like when you go see a movie, like, a lot of people go alone, a lot of people go with friends, but like you got to make it a spectacle, right? And it's like going to see the Dune movie with your friends in IMAX with the popcorn, with everything going, and you sneak, some snacks in the theater and all that stuff.
Yeah, you always need one friend with an oversized bag when you're going to a movie.
Yeah, that's right. The platform heels, so you can sneak booze in or something. The other thing too is just like you got to make the sequel. If you make the hit, you got to make the sequel. And like I know we just talked about Joker and how bad that did. I think that's like an execution thing. They were teed up.
Oh yeah,
a bunch of people saw it. It's just not as many as they wanted because it wasn't good. But for Dune, it's like you got to make the sequel. And like this is like one of the biggest things I don't understand at all in marketing, that people in marketing will do something that's successful and they won't do it again. And it drives me crazy. And it's like in B2B, it's like this. It's like, oh, we did this like crazy cool event last year. We did XYZ. How we had these people, we had a trapeze artist come in and like everybody loved it. They're like, what'd you do this year? Like, well, I don't know. It's kind of a lot of work to put on. I'm like, what? You just made something popular. Just do it again. Like, it's just crazy to me. And you just got to make the sequel.
I think that it's do it again, but take it to the next level. Like, because that's what either like, bigger spectacle, or I think for Dune, it was like continue the story. I think like to a campaign that I ran at my last gig, we mentioned it kind of at the top of this, like Dashboards Are Dead. Really successful campaign. We did a billboard, we had an ebook, we did ads, we had shirts, we did it at events. And then, 3 years later, we had released a big integration, using LLM technology, and we did a Dashboards Are Dead Part 2. AI is the, final nail in the coffin. So it was a natural way to take a story that we knew resonated, we knew worked, the creative we knew was successful, the executional tactics, that can all just kind of like that's the machinery. And then we updated the story and that gave us the sequel. And I think that's something that B2B marketers should be thinking about. It's either like, are you going bigger or are you evolving the narrative? Because both of those are opportunities, to using that analogy to like, that's your sequel.
Another thing that goes hand in hand with this, and we just did this for Murder in HR, so it's top of mind, the blending of events and content. If you make something worth talking about, throw the party so that the people can talk about it.
Yes.
And it's like all of those premiere events in all those cities all over the globe, like that stuff matters. Like it super matters. You look at obviously like, Taylor Swift they did all these like private events when her last album came out and like listening parties and all that sort of stuff. Like again, like not Dune related, but just this idea that like if you make content, also make the event, make a premiere, make a big deal out of it. We did this murder mystery themed, or this murder mystery podcast, Murder in HR, and then, Well Hub and Bamboo HR throw this amazing murder mystery themed event, dinner party. And it like did incredibly well. Like this is how you put two things together. And Dune, by doing all those, by the rollouts in person in those cities, like that is part of the thing that allows fans to get together, to talk about it, to meet each other.
Yeah. And I mean, that's to what we were just talking about. That's how you build that word of mouth. That's how 3 people become 6 people, become all 10 of the friends are like, okay, we got to go do it. I may not even be the friend who wants to go see Dune, but I definitely don't want to be the one friend who doesn't go, out to the bar with the rest of the group on a Friday night because I don't want to see a movie. That feels like a silly thing to an opt out, right? And so and the event is what is part of that. Like it makes it bigger, it makes it feel more like truly a special moment in time. And in general, I mean, I think that's one of the things that Dune did such a good job of. It felt like such like a lodestone for activity in a way that it was like, you can't miss it. You can't, I think we live in such a stream culture where it's like everything is on demand when I want it. So I'll just wait for it to get onto something else. And they did such a great job. And it's a combo of the event, the build up, right? The anticipation, the sequelization. I don't know if that's a word, but if it's not, it should be. And that's what really, I think, made the second one even more of a juggernaut at the box office, was like, this is like a moment in time. I have to see it in theater. I have to see it opening weekend, right? Like other shows that are entertainment content, like Game of Thrones did that probably better than anybody. If you think back on there was like, you have to watch the episode Sunday night because you don't want the spoiler, but you also want to watch it with friends. You want to talk about the episode as soon as it happens, right? And so there is, I think that's something that marketers should be thinking about too, is like, how do you create something that feels like this like pillar in the narrative of your industry, of your users' lives, of your buyers, purchasing cycle, where they're like, I can't miss going now. Not at some point, I'll think about it 6 months from now, let's have a follow-up conversation. It's why is this urgent? Why is this now?
Yeah, the other one, Deadpool versus Wolverine, which like, I mean, people are like buying fake IDs to be able to get into the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like, this is part of the thing, right? It's like, if you were, and you were between 14 and 18, you're figuring out a way to go see Deadpool. You
Absolutely.
know what I mean? Like, and, similar with Dune, where it's like, it just is appointment viewing. And we should add, it's long as hell. Dune is long. This defies
like 3
convention.
hours or something. It's crazy.
Which is like, nobody wants to go see a 3-hour movie. Oh, wait, actually, it turns out they really do. I think that's another part of this, that it's not for everyone, but like, if you make the thing that's cool, then you feel like you're getting your money's worth, right? It's the same amount for a ticket. But like, if I'm going to go do it, I want to go to the theater that serves alcohol, or that, has the snacks, that has the reclining chairs, that does, that I can go in IMAX, I can like really do this. And, like, again, it's like all about the spectacle. And if you're like, I'm going to do this once a year, this is the movie that I'm going to go do it for, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that's what even makes the box office performance even more impressive. I mean, just from a total real estate, if there's a 90-minute movie or a 3-hour movie, you're getting half as many at-bats in the theaters, right? And the fact that it still was, I think that even is an even greater indicator that like, yes, people are like, not only am I willing to sit in the theater for 3 hours, but so many people are like, I will go, I'll see it a second time, right? It was unmissable. And I think, again, that's like part of building a great brand, is like, it needs to be unmissable. It needs to be something where it's like, I have to be part of it today, now. And they clearly knocked it out of the park.
I'll add one more kind of hokey marketing takeaway from Dune. The voice. Like, you need to have the voice at your company. And I say this all the time, but when your CEO talks into a microphone, it is 50 times more valuable than anybody else in the company talking into a microphone. And maybe there's other executives that have a similar sort of panache or, whatever it is. But when your CEO speaks into a microphone, it really matters. I was just listening to the president of a company that did this like press hit. And this guy, I mean, it might have been the best 2-minute press hit I think I've ever seen in my life from a company. He weaved in a customer story. He weaved in like the product in a like super short elevator pitch. He weaved in like just like enough to sink your teeth into to go to this. I'm like, this could have been anyone in the company who said this, but because it's the president, it carries so much more weight that he's this smart about the product and about the customer. And you're just like, there's nothing like it. And like, if you're looking for your quote unquote, the voice, it ain't your sales rep. It ain't your head of, customer success. It ain't your CMO. It ain't your VP of sales. It's like you get your CEO talking into a microphone and it's way more valuable. And like, that is one to many that will work. So all I got to say is figure out a way to get the boss using the voice because people will listen.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, there's a reason, like classic, I come from like a comms background, and like there's a number one spokesperson at every company, and that spokesperson is always the CEO. Even if you have an official spokesperson whose job is spokesperson, they're a way to, support, amplify, take the questions maybe that the CEO doesn't want to. But when your CEO is taking the stage, and I think that's not just externally, I also think that's internally, right? Like, your team is like, that is the head of the company. This is where strategy is set. This is where the ultimate, accountability rests. This is where decision-making, eventually streams down from. So I think finding ways to bring, that voice and leverage channels where people are expecting or already consuming information is go, I want to hear from that person. And it's in a way, and it's in a format or in a channel that I'm already interested in. That's why I think like podcasts are a great opportunity, right? Like, people who are commuting into work are like, I want to listen to podcasts. I'm driving or I'm, on the bus or something. How great is it when you hear from, an interesting like thought leader and you're like, oh, that's the CEO of that company. All of a sudden that like interview with that podcast guest becomes so much more compelling because you're like, this is the ultimate, head honcho of that organization, and whatever they're saying, should carry weight and makes me more interested than if I'm hearing from, the VP of corporate marketing.
And then my small caveat to that is the second voice is, of course, the voice of the customer. And it's like your customers telling your story is so much better than your own, right? It's like they can tell your story far better than you can. And then your CEO can enforce the vision and the strategy and the why, especially if they're a founder, the why behind why they should stick with you, why they should go with you. But the proof is, is in what the customers say.
Yeah. And I think too, like even a kind of a spin on that is the customer is the story. The value that the customer is getting, the way that their world is different. Like they can also be the megaphone for it, but like you're a CEO, anyone who's, speaking on behalf of a company, if it's not rooted again, like sometimes one of the things I especially in the B2B world of marketing, it's like, people think, oh, our product is the story. And it's like, no, it's not. The story is what your customers, how their lives are better, different, more meaningful and fulfilling because of the product that you've built. And it's really about that reorienting yourself that like, it doesn't matter. It's so kind of what, back to the point about partnerships. Like, it's not that we partnered with company X and that's great. It's that, hey, you're already using these two things. Imagine if they work together more seamlessly. So and I think B2B marketers, great ones, are always orienting themselves in that outside in perspective where the story is about the customer. And then they go out and figure out how to tell that story in the most interesting way.
Ryan, I think we could keep talking about Dune for the next 2 hours, but I know that we all got to get out of here. Before we do though, what's coming up for Cribl? Anything cool on the horizon?
Yeah, definitely. We are out in the market right now. We're running some of our exciting pit stops, which is an opportunity if you want to come and meet Cribl out in the field talking about events. But perhaps even more exciting, we're getting ready to launch registration for our CriblCon, which is our big tentpole event of the year. It's happening in the fall of 2025. So be on the lookout for that. If you are somebody who cares about, understanding your telemetry data, making the most of it, getting it into the, sources, destinations that you need to, storing it in a more cost-effective way, this is the opportunity for you, to come and see the latest and greatest.
Fantastic. For our listeners, go check out Cribl, Cribl.io. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug here, Ryan?
I would be remiss if I did not plug that Dune has a TV show coming out. So for all you fans out there, it's coming on under Max, I think. So keep that story going. Turn the sequel into a franchise there. So,
hey, moonshots and serialized content. You have me at hello. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Meredith. I appreciate the opportunity to come and geek out with you all.
Take care. Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.